Daniel Sports Center, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the big matchup coming up here in the Big 12 in Week 11 of this 2022 college football season. And it's going to be the TCU Horned Frogs and the Texas Longhorns. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 11. You got TCU, who is still undefeated. This team is 9-0. They're one of 4 undefeated teams remaining in the nation. Who would have seen that coming? TCU is starting to emerge as a potential college football playoff contender. And they're taking on a Texas team that is 6-3 on the season, but they're coming off of a huge win over Kansas State. And the Longhorns, you could definitely say, are better than their record shows. We'll be covering a full game preview and prediction on this match here today, starting with your team trends. TCU beat Texas Tech 34-24, so a solid win for TCU in Week 10, and they're still undefeated. This team is 9-0. And, I mean, for a long time in the Big 12, it was just a wide-open conference. We had no idea. It could have been 7 or 8 different teams to win the conference back in early October. But now here in early November, TCU is 2 games ahead of everybody else in the conference. And if you're looking at overall records, TCU is 3 games ahead of everybody else. Pretty much Texas is the second best team in the conference, or they're second in the standings with a 4-2 record and 6-3 overall. So, I mean, TCU has really separated themselves in the past few weeks. And I mean, this is a massive surprise team. And I don't think anybody expected TCU to be this good. And this is obviously a huge season for that program, especially with first-year head coach Sonny Dykes. But as for Texas, they beat Kansas State 34-27. Kansas State was just coming off of their massive shutout win over Oklahoma State, and Texas was able to shut them down in Week 10. And they're 6-3 on the season. This is a 3-loss Texas team, but I've said this a few times. I think Texas is the best 3-loss team in the country. I mean, all 3 of their losses have come within 1 score, and they've played some tough opponents. One of their losses was to Alabama by 1. They lost to Oklahoma State by a touchdown, lost to Texas Tech in overtime. So, I mean, this is a talented Texas team. They just come on the wrong end of a few close games. Games be on Saturday, November 12th in Austin, Texas. The Longhorns are the home team for this matchup, and it's in prime time. College game day is coming to town. It's a nighttime environment. It's going to be a tough atmosphere for TCU to play in, and I'm sure Texas, coming off of a huge win over Kansas State, this place is going to be it should be packed, and it definitely should be loud. Your spread's going with Texas by 7 right now. So Texas is, I mean, despite having 3 less wins than TCU, they are favored by a touchdown currently in this matchup, over under 65.5, and the FPI is going Texas as well, 73%. So Longhorns are favored by a decent amount, considering TCU is ranked 4th in the AP poll right now. Texas is currently number 18. We'll see where both teams stand in the college football playoff rankings coming out on Tuesday night. But as of right now, it looks like TCU could be a top 4 team in the playoff rankings, and Texas is more than likely going to be in the top 20. Series history, Texas leads at 64-27. They won the last matchup, but TCU has actually had a successful recent history against Texas, winning 7 out of the past 10. Stat comparison, TCU is 5th in points per game this season. They're averaging 43 points a game. That's no joke. TCU has got a great offense, and they've got both in the rushing game and in the passing game. Max Duggan has been quietly one of the best quarterbacks in the nation this year. 2,400 yards, 24 touchdowns, over 2 picks. He's had a really good season for TCU, and he has really come around a ton over the past few years. It's been very impressive to see how he's transformed. And then you got Miller, who's the top in rushing. Kendre Miller, he's rushed for over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns, which is somewhat similar to where Robinson's stats are on the Texas side in the rushing game. So, this team is 33rd in pass yards a game, 12th in rush yards, and then in yards allowed, they're 94th in passing, 73rd in rushing. So defensively, this team has allowed a lot of yards, a lot of points this season. They're allowing on average 27 points a game. So defensively, this team has been a bit iffy at times, but offensively, they've been able to get it done for the most part. And as for Texas, they're 15th in points per game, 27th in points allowed. They're 48th in passers game, 32nd in rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 98th in passing, 28th in rushing. So you got a team with Quinn Ewers, who, when he's the quarterback, I feel like this team just plays better. And we saw that against Kansas State. This team was very impressive on the offensive side of the ball. They were up like 31-10 at halftime. So they got off to a great start and really rode that for the rest of the game. The second half was a bit slower. They only scored a field goal, but they still got the win in the end, which is what really matters. And then they're 32nd in rush yards games. They got a talented backfield, in particular Robinson, who's rushed for over 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns on the season. This team is averaging 192 rush yards a game this season, and TCU is slightly above that, averaging right around 220. Your recent matchups: TCU beat Texas Tech 34-24, beat West Virginia 41-31, beat K-State 38-28. They beat Oklahoma State 43-40 in double overtime. Also beat Kansas, and they gave them their first loss of the season, 38-31. So, TCU, this is a team that, Texas Tech, the game was close for a long time. The West Virginia game was close for a long time. Kansas State, they honestly had a good chance of losing that game had Adrian Martinez been in the entire game, or their quarterback situation not have been a mess. Oklahoma State almost lost to them. So TCU has been on the right end of a lot of close competitive games, and that's obviously kept this team undefeated. But it has brought up a question: is this TCU team for real? And obviously, you're going to say TCU's doing something right. They're 9-0 on the season. This team is still undefeated heading into the second week of November. They're doing something right. But it's just, when you have those close games against some mediocre opponents, given West Virginia, you start to question, could this team compete up with the best of them? Like if you said, if TCU faced off against Georgia or Alabama, or even Ohio State or Michigan, how would TCU do? And at this point, you can't confidently say that TCU is going to go up and pull an upset on Michigan or Ohio State, unless you're a TCU fan and you're super biased. I just don't think that TCU at this point, they can really prove themselves in this matchup as they take on a good Texas team. But so far this season, we just haven't really seen this team really prove that they're a dominant team. As for Texas, they beat Kansas State 34-27, lost to Oklahoma State 34-41, beat Iowa State 24-21, shut out Oklahoma 49-0, and beat West Virginia 38-20. Your key points for this one: TCU, this team is the Big 12's one hope at making the college football playoff at this point. It seems as if the ACC is completely out of hope of getting a team in the playoff. That's the one conference that's really been eliminated at this point, and if TCU takes a loss in this game, they're pretty much eliminated along with the Big 12. So, TCU at this point, it's pretty wild to say this, but this team is definitely the Big 12's one shot of getting to the college football playoff at this point. And offensively, they continue to be dominant. Defensively, they will need to be better if they want any chance of winning a national title, or at least being competitive in the college football playoff, given that they get there in the first place. But as for Texas, the Longhorns are better than the record shows. I do believe that. I feel like this team, with 3 losses, they're more as talented as like an 8-1 or 7-2 team, I would say. They've taken 3 close losses, and all 3 of them have been disappointing in their own ways. But I do think Texas is still a really talented team, and a team that should not be underestimated. They've been excellent on both sides of the ball, and they got a home field advantage in what is a crucial matchup for both these teams. And this is very well a game that we could see in the Big 12 championship in a few weeks from now. You got at the top of the Big 12, you got TCU, Texas, Baylor, and Kansas State right now. Texas, Baylor, and Kansas State are 4-2 in conference, and TCU, more than likely, I'd be stunned if they didn't make the Big 12 title game at this point. So we'll see how things wrap up, and if Texas wins this game, that really makes it look like we could see a rematch of TCU and Texas in the Big 12 title game in a few weeks. But that said, let's get some prediction here for TCU and Texas coming up here in Week 11, and I'm going to go with Texas to pull off the win. 38-27 is my predicted final score. And I mentioned this earlier. I feel like TCU, they're doing something right. They're 9-0. This team is still undefeated. You're doing something right if you're 9-0. But TCU, I just haven't been convinced that this team is as dominant as the record shows. They've won 9 games, but down the stretch, the past 3 or 4 games or so, they've really, they've been close to their opponents, and they haven't really even been great teams. I feel like West Virginia, that game was way closer than it should have been. If TCU is a college football playoff contender, you could say the same about the Texas Tech game. So, this is a game where TCU can really prove themselves, and if TCU beats Texas here, I will be much more convinced that the Horned Frogs are for real. But I'm going to go with Texas to win this one by a touchdown or 2 here. I do think Texas wins at 55%, over under 65.5. I'll take the under for this one, and Texas to cover the spread in the end. The spread is currently a touchdown towards Texas, and I do have the Longhorns controlling this game for the most part. I think we see TCU kind of hang in there like they have all season long. But I think in this one with Texas, it's going to be a tough atmosphere, and I think the Longhorns are able to get the win in this matchup 38-27. But this is definitely probably the most intriguing matchup coming up here in Week 11. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below here on this matchup, and I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.